What is up, my friends? We are back for a bit of a reaction to Liverpool's defeat by Nottingham Forest and a look ahead, of course, to our game against AC Milan tomorrow night in the Champions League. Firstly, David, lovely to have you back on, my friend, but how great is it to be sitting here again talking about the Champions League coming up tomorrow night?
Yeah, exciting. I mean, it was a decent European journey last year, doesn't it? But you never feel the same sort of magic unless it's this elite level competition. The Champions League is, what Liverpool Football Club's all about, isn't it? And is the thing that sets them out from all the other English clubs. The record there. So really, really good to be back. And again, just shows again that Jurgen Klopp signed off in not the best possible way, because that obviously would have been winning the title, but to restore Liverpool to the top four and get them back where they belong in the Champions League, and also add a trophy there. Was a great way to sign off, and obviously the rewards of that are coming into this game now. Big game against Milan, and something really to look forward to for fans and for the players, I guess.
I have to say, I was unsure about the new format, but as it approaches and as I look at the fixtures that we have, 8 really interesting fixtures against 8 different teams, every game really having something on it. I think I'm on board already, David, for the new format. How are you finding it?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think when I kind of saw the draw and I saw some of the games that they've got coming up, loads of them to really look forward to. They are exciting games, and big hitters in there, and big names. It is exciting, really, and it's going to be strange. You don't kind of know. As I've said this a couple of times, but you don't really know what a good draw looks like in this format. It's a bit all over the place, and it's going to take me a little while to maybe kind of work out, as they progress through the groups, what a good points tally looks like, and where that would put you relative to other teams, because it's this huge group that they put together, and it's a bit of a strange way of going at it. So a few things to kind of get my head around, I guess, as it progresses, but definitely looking at the fixture list, and starting with this one, which is a really, really good one to go back to San Siro. I know what you mean. I'm a lot more on board with it than I was maybe at the start of the season.
We did actually get confirmation that Chiesa's travelled over with the squad, which, maybe if you're going to give him a couple of minutes over in Italy against AC Milan, a club, a league, a structure, a team he'd know very well, are you expecting him maybe to get into the matchday squad for this one?
Yeah, I would really hope so. I mean, he's had quite a long time really to build that fitness up over the international break, training with the 21s, and also now joined in with the first team, and fully sort of involved in that. And I think, I personally kind of think it was a little bit of a mistake not to involve him against Nottingham Forest. I think games like that, you do tend to just need attacking options late in the game. And I think the fact that there was no Salah option there was a bit of an oversight, really. It proved in the end, because I didn't, I'm sure we'll get into the game itself. I didn't think Salah played particularly well. So I would have liked to see him involved in that game, but I think if that was a little bit of a mistake, then I think it's time now to right it. And as you say, going to kind of familiar surroundings at a stadium that he will have played in before, and against a team he'll have come up against as well. So I think that familiarity should help him out a little bit. And I would absolutely love Liverpool to get a bit of a lead, and then to see him come on to see out the game, because we're all really excited to see what he can bring, really, I guess.
Absolutely. I hope we do get to see him make a little cameo appearance off the bench. Looking back to the game at the weekend, I suppose we have to talk about it as much as none of us really want to, because do you know what strikes me, David? If you said to me before the season, Craig, you're going to go and you're going to play 4 games, you're going to concede 1 goal in the first 4 games, I would have bitten your hand off. But the way football is, the way it panned out, we conceded 1 goal on a day where our usual trustworthy attack had a bit of a breakdown and we weren't able to find a way through. I feel like, look, Forest deserved their victory. Full credit to them for the performance. They defended really well, and the goal that they took in the counter-attack was fantastic. But from our perspective, it feels a little bit tough, because you'd always back yourself to score at home at least one.
Yeah, it's kind of deflating, isn't it? Because you kind of bounced into that game thinking, oh, Liverpool are going to put these to the sword. They played, it's not just that the first 3 results were good, but the performances were really good. They've been so convincing. And so, you're coming up against a side in Forest who, to be fair, actually, you look, they've had a really, really good start to the season, and their underlying numbers reflect that as well. They've not been lucky in any stretch of the imagination. They've been really, really good in the performances, but you still think the Anfield factor, and the fact that Liverpool are playing so well, that was going to come together to give you a pretty convincing victory. But in the end, obviously, Liverpool really frustrated. I do think, we shouldn't kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater, and completely think that everything was terrible about it, because I've seen some analysis since, really, that is kind of like, it was absolutely, Liverpool were woeful in they deserve to get beat. And I think they deserve to get beat in the sense that you should be more dominant at home in terms of what you're creating, and you're always giving an opposition a chance if you don't do that and you don't create regular chances. But I thought, one thing I thought Liverpool were very, very solid again, which is something we were absolutely crying out for last season. They didn't give up very many chances. Forest just scored an unbelievable goal, really. So I thought Liverpool looked solid and structured again. I thought, centre halves played well. I thought Gravenberch was really, really good again in central midfield. I thought McAllister was good when he was on the pitch. So that control was definitely there, and Liverpool didn't really look like giving up a goal until Hudson-Odoi scored a worldie. It was just so bad in attack. And, one thing that maybe comforts you in that is that they haven't been poor in attack generally under Slot. What we've seen so far, I've been quite encouraged by that. And his teams generally do attack well. And I just think it gives you that little worry of, okay, well, it's a Premier League low block. Can he work his way around that? Has he solved the problem as big as that before? And that will be a concern until he starts to do it with regularity. But I think it's not time to kind of push the panic button yet. I thought Liverpool were just very poor in one particular aspect of the game that they hadn't been poor in up until this point in the season. So, don't want to make a habit of that, but maybe could have just been a little bit of a bad day at the office. And that, I think, is what I think Slot will be hoping.
I agree with everything you've said. I mean, defensively, I thought we were okay as well. I think Conor Bradley could have done a little bit better on Hudson-Odoi, if I'm being honest. But apart from that, I think we managed the game well defensively. And it was going forward, which is not a complaint us Liverpool fans can usually have. We attack and we score plenty of goals. So I do agree with you on everything you've said there in regards to the performance. I do want to touch on the substitutions, though, if I can for a moment. We've seen her make 2 blocks of substitutions, a 3 and a 2. None of them really playing any difference in the game. None of them making any impact compared to the substitutions Nuno made that did obviously come on and have an impact. What did you make of those substitutions from Arna?
Yeah, it just felt very much like they were planned prior to the game. I mean, McAllister, I thought Liverpool, and I know it's more the focus on the attacking subs, but I thought the McAllister sub was something he had to do because of the travel and the international games that he got through. But I think it made Liverpool an awful lot worse in terms of creativity and getting the ball into dangerous areas. I thought there was they did actually look a touch more threatening in that first half, but second half kind of fell apart. I thought the McAllister sub being pre-planned, I thought that was part of that. And then, as you say, that the forward substitutions, again, kind of didn't help in any way, really. I don't know whether that's, should he have changed the shape up front a little bit and approached it in that way? Maybe you put Nunez and Jota on together to really give that kind of mass defence something to really think about in central areas. Could he been braver and maybe taken off Salah, who I thought had one of his worst games? I think, he kind of needed to give their fullbacks something different to think about, because I thought Ola Reina and Alex Moreno were absolutely superb, by the way. We really should praise them for that. But I think, will Slot look back on that and think that his subs should have been more about maybe changing the shape rather than just swapping out the personnel, because that clearly didn't work. I just didn't think Gakpo or Nunez kind of added anything really in forward areas or made Liverpool more dangerous at all. So that is kind of something for the managers to think about. But it's I think those pre-planned subs, again, maybe that's something that Slot will learn about here, is that he probably can't always get away with those in Liverpool games. I think you're coming up against a tough one like that. Maybe you do have to just ride it out and try and win the game with the players you've got, or just come up with different formations or shapes to do it rather than always going ahead with the subs that you plan to try and keep that freshness there, because it maybe did add a little bit of freshness to Liverpool, but didn't add any quality or incision, and that is absolutely what they needed in that moment.
One thing that caught my eye in the game, and I truly am not trying to be sensationalist here at all, I had no problem with Trent when he was substituted being unhappy about it. Nobody wants to come off a pitch, but I wasn't very happy with his body language towards the referee in this game. I felt there was a couple of occasions where himself and Michael Oliver were chirping back and forth at each other. One that stood out to me was a throw-in on the far side of the pitch where Michael Oliver was clearly telling Trent, just go back 5-10 yards, go back, and he was chirping back at him. And then at the end of the game, again, he was up at the referee, and it just worried me. I'm not, I guess we will talk about the contract situations, but just that in itself, it was probably frustration, David, but it's one thing that stood out to me at the end of that game was Trent just looked a little bit unhappy, to say the least.
Yeah, I think he was applauding at the ref at one point as well, sarcastically, and I just think there's just no point getting him embroiled in stuff like that. I mean, he just, at the end of the day, you've just got to focus on trying to win the game, however you can do it, and trying to get the team playing better. Trying not, it's clear his frustration came from the fact he did hit a few passes, didn't he? I mean, he was one of 11 really who didn't play well, plus the subs as well. So that frustration maybe got to him a little bit. I mean, he's usually not like that, I would say, in terms of he's usually kind of a calm presence and doesn't let these sorts of things get to him. But he clearly did in that game. But it is just frustration. I think, ultimately he will have just wanted Liverpool to be playing better, and it just wasn't going their way. And as I said, the only solution is to play better, is to work it out. And I think that's between the managers and the players to do that. And he just couldn't on this occasion. But it isn't something you kind of want to see, because that, if you're an opposition player and you see that sort of stuff, you're loving it. You're thinking, we are getting in their heads. We're winning this game here. It's working. So that, I agree. It's kind of something you don't want to see. And especially from, again, vice captain, you've got to be geeing up your teammates. And pushing them to play better, rather than getting involved in kind of petty disputes with the referee. So hopefully we don't see too much of that anymore.
There are players, Gerrard in the past, Rooney, who needed to be on edge, who needed to be right, ready to snap at any moment, almost to get the best out of themselves. Normally, I wouldn't mention Trent, but that is something that's very unusual for him, as you mentioned. It's not something he makes a habit of.
I would say he's the type of player who doesn't need to do that as well. He's not a player who plays the game in kind of you want to play it in an aggressive way. He needs to be cool and calm and have the way to pass and the vision and, as I say, just that calmness really. So it's not something he needs to really get himself involved with. He should probably leave that to other players, and it didn't help his game in any way. So that kind of is the ultimate proof that it wasn't really worthwhile doing that.
Over the international break, I find that there's always a lot more speculation around players' contracts. Sometimes it's players been away on international duty, maybe getting a little bit bold and saying something about their club form or their manager or something like that. This time, I remember reading a couple of pieces, I think it was Caught Offside and a few others, who suggested that Liverpool were preparing to lose 2 or 3 of Trent, Virgil and Mo at the end of the season. So I guess the question that I'd like to ask from your conversations with your sources at the club are, do you believe that Liverpool really do want to keep all 3 of these guys? Or is there a possibility that maybe the underlying numbers that we aren't, of course, we don't have access to? We understand that there is a lot goes into making a decision about the future, especially with Virgil and Mohamed. They're getting older. 2 to 3 years is probably what the players would want. So we just wanted what kind of vibes you're getting from the club about these extensions.
Yeah, I don't get the impression at all that a kind of a decision's been made where we can lose X and Y and maybe then we keep Z. I don't think it's anything like that. I mean, ultimately, I think they can see the value in keeping all 3 in terms of, you look at the level that Salah's performing at outside of Saturday, maybe. Virgil's looked fantastic still, I thought, even on Saturday, and I still think he's got a few more years left in him yet. And obviously Trent's absolute no-brainer that Liverpool, I think you can put him almost as a separate case, that he 100%, they are desperate to keep him. Absolutely zero questions about that. But I think with the Salah and Virgil ones, and I will consistently say this and have done, is that compromise has to come from somewhere. I think, they're both on very big money in terms of the length of the contract and what the size of those contracts. That is a very difficult discussion. I think you can see with what Virgil said recently and what Salah said as well, how they've both come out publicly. There's maybe a little bit of panic on their side that, we're not going to get the deal here, or we a little bit worried that Liverpool is sort of edging towards letting them go. But I think, as I say, that there has to be that compromise there from them. And I think, you look at Salah's performance on Saturday, and I don't want to focus on him too much, because, as I say, I thought everybody in the final third played poorly. Forwards, Szoboszlai, everything he did in that area didn't really work. So it's not just to focus on Salah, but you really do have to think, don't you, about his contract and the size of it and how many years you give him. There's a real risk that these performances, like Saturday's, start to just creep in a little bit more regularly. So it's so easy to say when he had the start of the season that he did, got to give him it. You've got to give him the contract. But there's so much risk attached to that. You do not want to be 2 years out from the end of this extension you've given him, and he starts playing poorly, one every other game. That is the real risk, and it happens. You can't outrun the fact that the age gets to players, that they do the performance levels start to wane. So that's the real concern for Liverpool. So I don't think any big decisions have been made in terms of, no, we're absolutely not signing them up, because I don't think the discussions have reached that point where the players have said, well, I would only accept this and therefore. So I think everything's still on the table in terms of that. I don't think big decisions have been made, or it's not my understanding that any big decisions have been made around that stuff. But it's all about, when they do sit down and they have these conversations now, that compromise has to be there. Certainly in terms of contract length, I think, certainly more maybe than the money that they're on, because I think, Virgil and Salah, if Liverpool are to push those contracts, it would be very much sort of in the 2-year bracket rather than anything longer than that, because I just think the risk is far too big if they do that.
I think most of us would agree 2 years for Virgil and Mohammed. Maybe the club having an option of a third in the deal will probably be where it's at. My own personal take on this would be I wouldn't really expect or want either of them to get pay rises, because let's be honest, as good as they both still are, and they are past their peak. I don't think there's any question about that. So I think most of us are just anxious because we know if we were to lose 2, 3 or any of them, they're very big shoes to fill in the squad. It's probably going to cost the club a significant amount of money as well to go and fill those positions. I did want to get your thoughts actually, David, on the atmosphere, because it's been a bit of a talking point over the start of the season that maybe the Anfield atmosphere isn't what it once was. You're there week in and week out as a journalist covering the games at home. What are your thoughts on the atmosphere?
Yeah, I don't think it's been fantastic so far, but I would say, it very rarely is. I don't know whether it's kind of not coming across as well as usually does on television or whatever, because it seems to be a bigger talking point rather than just inside the people who are necessarily there. But I think I can't really remember many early season games against Brentford at home or against Nottingham Forest at home where the atmosphere was absolutely electric. I mean, particularly against Nottingham Forest at home as well, when Liverpool are losing the game and it's a bit frustrating. It's not the kind of game that everyone's really enjoying. I don't think it's a huge surprise that it wasn't absolutely bouncing in that moment. But these are just early season games against sides that are probably going to finish in the bottom half of the table. Nobody really knows what is at stake or whether Liverpool will be in a title race this season, so they don't know how important these points necessarily are going to be. Or, I'm not massively surprised, and I don't think it's a new thing that the atmosphere in these games isn't like Chelsea in 2005. It's been like that for a long time, and the majority really of my time covering the club over the last sort of more than a decade now. So I don't remember going to these games and being absolutely blown away by the atmosphere. It's very, very good when it's good, in the right sort of circumstances. But these kind of run-of-the-mill Premier League home games, they're generally not that great, or they're okay. So I don't think it's anything new. I just think sometimes people get a little bit fixated on it at times, but I'm not. I don't really massively buy into the idea that it's any worse than it has been, certainly in the last 5 or 6 years.
For me, I always watch the games when I'm doing watch-alongs completely on mute because of copyright reasons. So I never get to hear. So I'm always reliant on the audience during the watch-alongs to tell me what it's like. And there was a really good piece in the Echo written on this from, I can't remember the gentleman that wrote the article. It wasn't one of the regular journalists. He's been a season ticket holder for 25 years and he spoke about it. I thought it was a really good piece, David. It spoke about all the factors from, people who probably should have graduated from the COP into the main stand by now, the availability of not being able to go there with a group of your mates as an example. And I think I would like to see the club engage with fans on this because if at all possible, it would be great. I've loved the idea, for instance, of something similar to an unreserved area on the COP where, you have your season ticket in there, but maybe you can go in there with 5, 6, 7 of your mates, start singing. And look, it's a young man's game on the COP. We know that from the years we've been on there ourselves. Have you any suggestions or anything that you think might make an impact to the atmosphere? Somebody who goes week in, week out?
Well, I do wonder whether they want, people kind of look down on this stuff and think, oh, you shouldn't need it, or, this is kind of, it's not cool to do it or go down this route. But I really, if the atmosphere is not, if we want a better atmosphere, even at these sort of lower level games that, where it's not a huge amount on the line, then I think you do have to think about things like a singing section, or, you look at one of the grounds I always go to and I'm always blown away is Crystal Palace. I think the atmosphere there is incredible, and they have that Homesdale area, don't they, where the fans are just superb and they make all the noise, and it's really, really is. I always think it's a great atmosphere there. So that, that takes the club to engage in it and have that singing section and police that and work out how that works. So, maybe it is time for Liverpool to go down that route, because I do think, that gives you a guarantee of a certain level of atmosphere then in games, doesn't it? And if you can work that out, and then you go from there, and then obviously bigger games are always going to be massive. But I agree. I think it's kind of a multitude of factors. I think people kind of get on the soapbox a little bit, or focus on a particular area that suits their agenda as well. So it's kind of, they either blame the locals or blame the out of towners, or it's kind of whichever side of the fence you fall on there. People like to focus the blame on them, and the fact is, it's there's as many sort of Scousers who turn up and don't sing as there are sort of tourists who turn up and don't sing. It's a mixture of factors, and as I say, I think a singing section or something like that would be a really good solution to make sure that, okay, well, there's always going to be this big chunk of fans that are together that want to sing, they want to create an atmosphere. And you can always get them together, then I think it does guarantee you at least a baseline level of atmosphere, and that I think that would be a good approach. Even though I know some people aren't big fans of sort of going down that route and kind of creating the atmosphere in that way, but for me, as I say, I've seen it over the grounds, and I think it does work.
I like the idea of, and again, this is going to sound a little bit cheesy to people who maybe go week in and week out, but I like the idea of, if you buy a ticket directly from the club, let's say, maybe you get a little video, or you get a little education on the atmosphere, some of the songs that you can expect to hear on the cop, things like that, just to kind of get people more engaged and get the club, trying to get that atmosphere up for these type of games. Because we all know when Real Madrid show up and when Xavi Alonso and Leverkusen show up, nobody's going to need any help. They're going to meet the coach, they're going to go there, the place is going to be rocking. I wanted to come back to midfield for just a second, and with Toro Endo in particular, David. One of the questions that keeps getting asked of me on our live streams is why he's not getting opportunities, why he's not getting the ability to come on, let's say, play alongside Ryan Gravenberch. And the only answer I've been able to give is that I presume or assume that Arne just doesn't feel that he is the right type of player for the way he would like that position to be played. Not that he isn't good enough, but just for the particular way he sees a number 6. Toro Endo probably just doesn't fit into that category.
Yeah, very much my understanding that that's the case, really, is that he had a look at it in pre-season and wasn't massively convinced. As you say, not saying that Wataru is a poor player by any means, but very much just not a fit for what he wants in that area. I mean, you can see, I talked about earlier about Liverpool kind of losing the way a little bit without Alexis McAllister on the pitch. And I think, if you'd have swapped in Endo for him there, I don't think that solves that problem, because he doesn't really give you that kind of deep line playmaking sort of qualities, does he? He doesn't give you that. He's more of a destroyer and then pass it off to players around him. For me, Liverpool, the reason that they looked at Zubimendi so closely is that he does profile similar to McAllister. There are real similarities between the two players. And so the idea is, in a game like that, would have been ideal that, okay, if you don't start McAllister and Zubimendi, gives you the option to at least, if you had to swap McAllister out, you can put Zubimendi in. You've still got someone who can fire those passes in from deep positions, keep Liverpool getting the ball into the final third. That's an ideal situation, but he obviously doesn't think that Endo can do that. And I think that's maybe a fair criticism on the basis of what we've seen of the player. But I mean, it's on Endo now, particularly in this situation now, where Liverpool have got so many games at the moment. They're down a midfielder because Harvey Elliott's injured. Can Endo sneak some games? Can he sneak some minutes and show that he maybe can do a little bit more of that? Can has that quality in him? We'll have to see. But it is a case very much of the manager not kind of loving his profile, and that is why Liverpool wanted a defensive midfielder this summer, and why they will continue to monitor that market going forward into January. I mean, I know that Zubimendi still hasn't signed his contract, so always keep
that's
an eye
in my
on
notes here. That was the last question I was going to ask.
Yeah, I mean, that's just interesting, isn't it? I just think as long as he doesn't sign that contract, and as long as Real Sociedad don't think have had a fantastic start to the season, might look to them and think, well, okay, is this the time to cash in? Maybe he was going to leave next summer anyway. He only said, maybe he thought in his head, I'll do one more season. But if it gets to January and Sociedad don't have an awful lot to play for, Liverpool still like the player. They haven't closed the door on it as far as I'm aware. So, let's see. I wouldn't rule that one out until that contract is signed, and maybe there's a release clause in with a heftier fee in it that maybe wouldn't tempt Liverpool. As things stand, I absolutely wouldn't rule out that they go back in for him in January.
Even the conversations coming from Sociedad side seem to suggest that there was never really any talk of a contract extension. What you're hearing from them, it was reported at the time that it was believed he was going to get a significant. I think he's on about €60,000 a week, something like that. He was going to get a significant pay rise from Sociedad. So if you're him, and as you said, you look around at the landscape, and they haven't had a good start this season. I think they're in the lower half of the La Liga table. They've lost players, obviously one to Arsenal. You're going to ask yourself, did I make the right decision? I think it's only natural. So it is going to be very interesting, David, to have a look at this January market to see if perhaps it changed. One last quick question on the market. There was a report that said that Liverpool had looked at two centre backs, but they were unable to attract both of their top targets. I wondered, had you heard anything on that? Because when you say unable to attract, your mind scans and you think, well, is it because of the wages? Is it because maybe the clubs didn't want to sell those players? Was it that those players maybe weren't unsure about the new manager coming in and what Liverpool may look like under Arne Slot? Or is it just nonsense that the media have made up?
Yeah, I kind of saw a hint of this report, and for me, I wonder whether Lenny Oro was one of the names that was being used in that sense. And for me, I don't think it's accurate to say that Liverpool, couldn't kind of get that over the line or whatever. They made a decision on that one. It was just the case that for that money, he isn't worth that to us at this moment. And to be fair, like I've always said consistently on this, that ultimately the proof of whether that's the right decision will be the season. And I think up to this point in the season, you'd have to say that, I know we're only 4 games in, but you'd have to say that, where would Lenny Yoro have got minutes so far? Probably wouldn't have at all. Again, as the season progresses and the games pile up, if Canate stays fit, if Quanta has a very good season again, which is obviously the hope, then you'll start to wonder where Yoro would have fitted in. So I don't think a centre half was it by any measure really seen as an absolute must for this season at all. So I'm not massively convinced by that, to be honest.
So before I let you go, I've really enjoyed reading your Substack over the course of the season so far, and I just wanted to ask you what maybe the readers and viewers of your YouTube channel can expect coming up in the near future.
Yeah, so a lot coming up. Working on a kind of deep dive into Ryan Gravenberch's background at the moment, so hoping to have that lined up for the next international break. But obviously, very busy with match coverage at the moment and all the stuff around that. But obviously, there's going to be a lot of contract talks and looking towards January, of course, and all that. So yeah, that's the plan for the coverage. And yeah, if people want to have a look at that and subscribe, I really would appreciate it.
David, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. We do appreciate it. And of course, I'd urge everyone to go over and check out David's Substack and, of course, the David Lynch YouTube channel as well. Until then, my friend, I will catch up with you soon. Thank you, folks. Bye bye.